user as part of my life as an early career researcher. So I can also hopefully provide some perspective on how that's helped me as an early career scientist and how I've hopefully used that as a science communication tool. I've done kind of guest spots for field scientists and biotweets and other science accounts. And I also run the social media platform for the Integrative and Comparative Biology journal. So I also have some social media experience from a journal perspective. Yeah.
And the associated meetings, or is it more?
It's linked to the meetings, but we're specifically for the journal.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so before we get started with, I think if you all, we can start having discussion questions, but that might, lead to some new topics that come up, or we could introduce topics as we go, but it might be better to start the discussion. But first, Teresa put together a couple of slides just to give you, many of you probably have some sense, but it's neat to see the numbers as well. So, crazy proportion of people are using different forms of social media. This is worldwide, which is one of the neat things I think for all of us about outreach, science communication. Even amongst yes, among scientists, but also being able to in a real way connect with non-scientists about our work and related issues. And there's different social media platforms, and we probably all have our favorites, and some that we're use less often or more often. But I think each is good to understand, and it's always it's going to be a constant changing landscape. In 5 years, probably the best platform for a particular usage might be something different. So it's always good to be aware of what's out there and what's up and coming. Yes.
Out of these social media platforms, what do you think is the most popular in science?
I think my opinion to that answer is that Twitter is the most popular, Twitter is the most effective, Facebook is the most popular. Facebook still has the largest number of readers of our broader and more traditional scientific communities, but those communities are more closed. And Twitter, you have more users who are using the platform, more purely for science communication outreach and so on. And then because of the way that Twitter is set up, you are by definition connecting to many non-science users. So I don't know if you all would want to.
A lot of the extension of Facebook is a little more popular in the extension world than Twitter.
Yes, yeah.
So
yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to connect the Facebook and the Twitter.
That's so you're with Penn State Extension?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool.
I'm really not sure. Not venture guess there, yeah.
Yeah, I feel just from I managed the Penn State Research Facebook and Twitter account for a while, and what I found is it depends sort of on the audience. The Facebook audience has much more of a general USA Today feel, but the Twitter users I felt were there was a big science group there, and they were a very motivated science group. So I think it depends on which audience you want to hit. And that's just a kind of anecdotal. I will be full of anecdotal.
In terms of efficacy, the ICB, Integrative Comparative Biology, we have both a Facebook and a Twitter page. And I would say my impression, I'm predominantly a Twitter user, and that's what I go to get science information. Yeah, I find it easier. So I would say I found the ICB Twitter community to be much more dynamic and get much more immediate feedback. So it feels like it's more efficient. But I have noticed we both of those accounts are linked to a WordPress blog, and just the last posting, I noticed that we were getting as many clicks from Facebook as we were from Twitter, even though my impression had been that we post once a week on Facebook, whereas we try and post a couple of times a day on Twitter. So we were getting as much, people were coming to the blog as much from Facebook as from Twitter, which I think gives me the impression in a way that both are used. Yeah, even though my impression had been that Twitter was more.
Penn State's social media office, we do a lot of research and science-focused stories on their LinkedIn account too. And what's some pretty good engagement for that. Now that took, Penn State had a very large following because, once you label Penn State as your employer or your school, you were automatically a follower of the account. So, it's so maybe not the best platform to reach people who aren't following you like Twitter would. If you use the right hashtags and all that, you can have bigger reach. But if you start getting a sizable following, there's an interest in that sort of thing on LinkedIn.
Can social media be a useful platform for sharing scientific information? I think we're all four of us firm believers, yes, and we can give some, anecdotes, but also information that we built up from, a little bit more than just anecdotal. Although I don't think any of us have conducted, really thorough surveys and so on. But we can give. I think the point that maybe I'd like to make just briefly related to this question or statement is that Twitter and other social media platforms can benefit your research quite directly in terms of awareness in the scientific community, the metrics that academics, departments are often thinking about, people downloading your papers, being aware of your work, citing your work, and so on. And then in addition, even with doing the things that would reach the academic community, but a broader academic community, a more interdisciplinary academic community, you have two other benefits. That one, you're widening your awareness of things going on, and we probably all have examples of neat things that we were then able to incorporate into our studies because we saw them through a more interdisciplinary and open platform. But then you also are reaching, maybe sometimes not at all, maybe sometimes to great effectiveness, a non-academic audience, which is very gratifying, I think, personally, and then of course that's something that we probably all strive to do. So I think it's very useful, but probably you all are here because you think it also has the same potential.
Yeah, I'm curious, sometimes you do see blogs lumped in with social media platforms because it's a little more interactive. It's often opened up for a comment section, that sort of thing. So that could be a blog I see is sometimes maybe a nice middle ground if you are very skeptical or worried or don't feel like you have time to devote to a lot of social media. That may just be another way to get a message out, make it a little bit more interactive and accessible.
$57% of Americans say they talk to more people online than they do in person. Yes, that makes sense. in a way that's
Emails. That includes emails.
Yes. Less than 2/3 of college faculty participate in social media. I mean, that rings true so far, but I think there's a change over time here, and it's increasingly being perceived as a useful tool. And even I would for early career people, and as you're advising your trainees or graduate students in your department and so on, like this is a way for active people doing neat things to become known and for opportunities to find those people. I mean, I know that Kirsty's has a really great reach for an early career scientist through her social media activity, and I saw that Kirsty was doing neat things before she came to Penn State, for example. And people are invited to give talks and so on. So I think that there'll be more faculty who are active and leaders in their community in this way who became faculty in part for that reason. So for two reasons, we'll see increasing adoption. I predict.
Younger people too, probably. So your younger people who are using the social media versus your older professors.
Yeah. Although I think that there's a lot of scientists have adapted to different technologies in their research very effectively throughout their careers, and many of those more senior established scientists are joining to great effectiveness in terms of these conversations and these outlets for outreach.
Can I just
Yeah,
add one bit about so that's a very startling figure for me that less than 2/3 of college faculty participate in social media. Because one of the things that has happened, and I don't have the exact dates, but I think in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, there was probably more than 100 newspapers, daily newspapers with a science section. So that means that they had science journalists, editors, graphic artists, all involved in the enterprise of going in, finding those studies in journals or wherever they could find them, and writing stories about them. And now they're gone because social media replaced that. So there's been a real disruption in that. And so what I would suggest is that with no one going in and getting the science, you're now a journalist. It reminds me of the Charles Barkley story where he said he wasn't a role model. He was this NBA man, guy who said he wasn't a role model. And then he said he didn't ask for it, he didn't want it. And the announcer said, well, too bad, you're a role model. And so what I'm telling you now is you're a journalist. Part of your responsibility is to get that word out about the science that you're doing. It's critical. When I first started my job about 10 years ago, one of the problems I had was I had to get the news out quickly so that I wasn't scooped by these science journalists. And now that's really not a factor. They're just not there going after those stories. So it's become a real responsibility. And I think some people have a tendency not to self-promote, but I think it should be part of the mission.
So this slide is related to some of the outreach benefits of using social media related to science and research. And of course, some of these facts are sobering, but they're realities. And I think that not every user of social media as a scientist or as a department will make significant chips away, but it's more than just the present thing of what you're doing. I think you're creating a platform that your students and other people are comfortable and don't feel like it's a negative to use and get involved in, and you don't know where something can take off. And we've seen examples. We have a colleague who started something on social media called Marshmallow Madness, and it brings me to happy tears every year to see the kids in inner school cities with low resources who are pumped for a month to learn about all these different mammals and scientific facts about them, and it's like all through this type of outlet, right? And not everything's going to be like that. Some things make a small difference. There's an additive thing, but there's also opportunities for really affecting our country in a positive way for the next generation. Okay. And I think this is an example of what I was just mentioning. And now, thank you, Teresa, for putting together some of those slides and facts just to have some of that perspective. But we can go towards open discussion and questions. It's really for you, and we're here. But I think all of you are going to have some insights from your own experience as well that we're interested in hearing, because we're all still learning every day as we go too.
So how do you evaluate which one of those platforms is best for your purpose? I'm sorry, that's very broad.
No. That's a great
Because,
question.
most of us, we have full-time jobs already.
Uh-huh.
And then to go and have to do every single one of those platforms to test it. I spent a year testing Twitter. I'm not going to test any other ones. I'm done, And it had some benefits, but it definitely had a lot of flaws.
Yeah.
And I don't know that overall it was worth the amount of time.
What were some of the flaws?
So my purpose for getting into Twitter was specifically to disseminate information, but also encourage information back as far as like education and connecting outreach and my research. And that was fine. It was just that from there, there's a lot of people don't make the divide between their science and their personal or political affiliations, and I don't feel that that's right for people that are following me to see all of that anger, that screed going. And so I have to, slowly filter through all of that. And for me, I spent a good amount of time filtering all that out. And that didn't work very well. But I'm assuming there are other platforms that would be better for that. So better suited for more positive engagement, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always saw at Penn State's office that LinkedIn was kind of a place for a more professional conversation, that you were less to see arguments in the comments section and nasty comments, that sort of thing. And I really think LinkedIn has come a long way. They're trying to get rid of this kind of reputation they have, kind of this stodgy place, and really make it as a social media platform that has a lot of features that you're already familiar with. Now you have the ability to post a video directly there. You can post multiple photographs. You can do long form posts. Essentially, you can use LinkedIn as a blogging platform. And with something like that, where your followers or those connections that you've cultivated with people who probably the majority of them are like-minded folks and probably in your industry, you may find that you've already created an audience that's looking for, that expects your type of content and wants it. And it's just they've gotten really good at making it a more fun place, not just a static location for a digital resume. They want people to check in regularly and experience a feed similar to what they see on Facebook. So that can be a good way to really, through the connections that you make and the people you seek out, having something that really appeals to you and speaks to you, and you're not seeing political ramblings or baby photos or whatever.
Hey.
I think LinkedIn is super underutilized to begin with.
Yeah.
This is coming from somebody did my undergrad work here and now working here. It's something that I actually had as an assignment in a class. The professor made it one of our first assignments was to make a LinkedIn profile and immediately friend him, and then everyone else in the class. And that was kind of weird to begin with, but then the more and more I got involved with other things, the more I would have other professors that were willing to be your friend on LinkedIn and then endorse you for different skills. And then as I did events with the university and became involved with ASABE, so Agricultural and Biological Society of Engineers. Sorry, it's a mouthful. But as I got involved with them, I made further connections. And then the combination of intertwining the agricultural side of what I do and the science side of what I do became a lot easier, because I didn't have to go looking for all these different people. It would show up people you may know, or companies you may be interested in, jobs you may find useful. And I think that's really, really underutilized because people see LinkedIn so much more as a how to find jobs, as opposed to a networking type of site.
Yeah, and it uses groups just like you find on Facebook, so you can be involved in a private group that you can probably find one for your area of expertise, and then it creates a whole other channel for communication, with people you don't even have to formally connect with through LinkedIn. And I've done similar assignments at my class, and it's really gratifying to see students after that assignment's done doing things on LinkedIn that, sharing stuff. Just had a student who spoke during TEDx PSU, and she was promoting it on LinkedIn. I was really happy to see that it has stuck a little bit.
It's cool to make connections, because a lot of people what I realized that it's a lot more popular in Canada than I expected it to be, because certain events that I take part in, I make a lot of connections with people from Canada, and every single school that I've made connections with, their school will endorse you, or their school will be we'll have whoever's the head of this department is now somebody who's endorsing you on LinkedIn, and I'm I met this person once at a dinner, but this is really cool and I appreciate this, but it's definitely not something I expected when I had that assignment however many years ago.
Yeah.
So it's come a long way.
Yeah.
One idea in terms of testing out things, and maybe this isn't really testing out, but so my own approach is a little selfish in that I have awareness of where I might be getting the most reach, but also I get the most value out of Twitter, and so then I use that more. And then the extrinsic and the intrinsic motivations are a match, and it's not I think it's still working, although I hopefully will be self-aware when Twitter stops being used as much, and some other platform comes up and I need to learn how to use Snapchat, for example, or whatever you invent some catchy name and whatever it is. But so one thing that I've noticed through our department, on a per post basis, Facebook reaches more people. And I don't like using Facebook as much. I don't use it for myself for these same reasons. You know, I mean, I only use it for personal things and very lightly for my own stuff. And Twitter for me is like, it's science Twitter. It's completely, you know, separated from personal things. But you can set up automatic ways across these platforms. So you can post in one, and that post will be propagated across multiple platforms.
Twitter and everything you post on Twitter gets automatically reposted to Facebook.
Exactly. You have to be careful in the direction that you do this because, for example, Instagram posts have super long, text, and then when people have that going into Twitter and it doesn't work, it's not very effective. But if you have it going in the right direction, that can be really effective and then minimize the investment that you have. So I'll say like our department, Facebook reaches more people for a given post, and it's good to get the news out. But in terms of some posts reaching magnitudes more people, Twitter is more effective, and so that's been my experience. And you can have something that can go reach worldwide audiences at a scale and speed that doesn't happen on Facebook unless you buy it, right? But those are some of my own experiences or thoughts on that. And I have other comments related to enjoying the use of the platform and how maybe Twitter changed since the election and things like that, but we can say that in a later discussion.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of not following the political side, but are there ways of evaluating? Because I've only come across maybe 3 or 4 papers actually evaluating the use in the context of specific fields, but it is very narrow. So it's like, this in the context of medical professionals, this in the context of, what was the other one? There were 4 of them, but I can only remember the medical professionals. And there were 2, but one of them was looking at public health, and it was specifically at Johns Hopkins. And what someone did was he went and asked all of the people that were at Hopkins, have you used this? And a huge amount of them, not, even though they all admitted that there was value. And that it was a good way to disseminate information, but they weren't using it to get feedback back. So it was very one-sided. So I mean, I'm not sure how to evaluate that and how to make, I think it's fine to have it, but it's also like our perceptions of things is really skewed without having actual data. And I don't know how to go about getting the data to find out, am I actually having an impact? Is it really worth pursuing this particular platform as opposed to another for my purposes?
Well, we do have data on our own posts across different platforms, so we have, I guess it's a little anecdotal, but the reach is surprising in terms of numbers of people who see, who click on content, etc. I don't know if you want to give some numbers, anybody, but I have some anecdotes from some of my own stuff. But
so I guess it depends what you mean by what specifically you want to evaluate. But Twitter, I think, has some fairly comprehensive statistics built, like algorithms built into the site itself. So you can actually see. It's now quite sophisticated. It's definitely become more sophisticated. You can now compare the reach of this week's, your Twitter output for this week to last week, and look at specific tweets and see how many people have actually clicked on this, how many people have then, clicked on the link and then gone and looked at something else. So I think if you wanted to quantify reach, it's particularly easy through Twitter. But alt-metric scores on articles are now becoming a little bit more widely used, I think.
Yeah, our department uses it.
Yeah, and I think you can then go, so if you wanted to look more at the ultimate outcomes, you could then go to your articles and look at not how you've used Twitter and so on, but how it has been, how people have got to it through those platforms.
And those similar kinds of I'm not sure what to call them, metrics, I guess, are they in all of the platforms, or does it vary from platform to platform?
If you have a say a department Facebook account, you see how many people saw it, how many people interacted with it. It's not as sophisticated as the metrics for Twitter, but you at least can get a baseline awareness of reach. Some of the reach of Facebook, they've tweaked their algorithms because they're trying to get those group pages to purchase The wider reach, so they limit it a bit more. It's not quite as spready as it was. I've noticed a change over the last 6 months. I think about 6 months ago they changed their algorithms. But yeah, you get that baseline. You get that baseline number.
You can get a pretty good feel of how much impact they're getting in the community based on things like likes, retweets, views. Like Twitter has a lot of information you can use for that. In fact, if you go even deeper, you can see how many people interacted with your tweet. Even like they'll give you a list of the most interactive tweets you've had, so you can kind of distill down the formula of like what really gets people to look at your stuff.
So on a purely, thinking as an academic, if just on the selfish perspective of why this might be good for me, and then like I said, I think there's other reasons. I've had tweets about, my group publishes a paper, or a student publishes a paper or something, and I, say, hey, we're excited about this new work. Here's what it's about. Put an image in there. Sometimes like 20 people interact with it or whatever. And hey, that's 20 people who might not have before, and you have different touch points or whatever. I've had a couple of papers where over 500,000 people have seen that tweet, right? Like it's come across their screen over 500,000 people for a couple of papers. That doesn't happen every time, but and on a scale, and where the number of clicks on the article, because you can go look at the article, and some people got it through other means, of course, but over 5,000 people looking at the article, and the people looking at the article are probably scientists, right? So that's thinking about academic impact, but a lot of the 500,000 people may not be, and I know because sometimes people ask me questions or interact with me on the platform, like that's really amazing, or some kid like there's an extinct giant lemur the size of a gorilla, like stuff like that. It's neat. So there are ways to quantify it. It is, it takes time to build that up to that level, but now that we have that, when Kirsty has students, she can really help promote their stuff themselves as developing scientists who also are interested in outreach and broader impacts and such as well, and help get their stuff going to a similar level.
And I would also add that, again, to think like an editor with that content. Visual content tends to go Instagram, more pop-sci with images, maybe Facebook. Twitter, I think, is great, to get a quick word out and to start a conversation is usually the way I looked at it. So, and the other thing is, you have to curate your own content. Some of the stuff is just not going to go. And some of the stuff is going to go great. And it's going to be, how are you going to arrange that tweet? How are you going to talk about it? What hashtags are you going to use? So those are all ways that you can elevate the content. So again, it's just thinking like an editor.
Timing is also very important because let's say you have a hot button issue like global warming, climate change. That's going to be more effective when there's this big political debate around it, just as opposed to just like on a random Tuesday. So you really also got to pick your moments to try to wedge yourself into the conversation.
Is there times that are better for tweeting a Facebook group?
Yeah, you can actually tell that based on.
Mornings or evenings or what?
It depends what's trending at the moment. Like that's usually what I use as the metric. Sometimes tweeting can go better in the morning or late at night. Like you'd be amazed how many people are tweeting at like 3 a.m.
It also depends on who you're trying to reach too.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to reach like people that are like students, your best time to tweet is going to be sometime right around like summertime, because everybody's getting on to check their social media before they go out.
Yeah.
Like that's just what happens.
Usually you don't see as much activity like just during a normal workday. It would need like later in the evening.
No, I mean this is good. This is a good discussion. We were just, I think, we probably both have the opposite experience. Like mid-morning is the best time because the people in Europe are still, at the end of their workday. You're catching people on the West Coast, as they're. But if you go, I've done things too early here, and I'm like, I thought that was really cool, and nothing happens, and then somebody else tweets about it, like, crazy. I think that was one of my earlier experiences, but I think it's the audience that you're connecting to, and you'd be surprised. There's variation there, but for me, the mid-morning is actually the best. Whereas maybe for a different audience, it's a different time. Yeah.
Is there a way to better reach people who are not always savvy with Twitter and Facebook? So like a lot of our extension are to older individuals who are forced to get on the bandwagon more so. So advertising in local newsletters, emailing is mostly, but trying to get more likes and more publicity with our social media is kind of a challenge
That's a good,
for me.
good question.
And it's just our audience, it tends to be a little bit older.
Define older.
Probably 50 and retired.
If they're like relatively computer savvy, then you might be able to use YouTube just to show them a video that may be able to help educate them.
Okay. Then we're just getting more
So-
likes out. We're trying to get a little more likes and videos and such.
I love extension. So I mean, I'm from rural Iowa, and so this is, you know,
The
extension.
farmers. we have big
Extension
farm-
is my original, you know, thinking about the power of outreach and communication with university, and like, it's just a wonderful thing that we have at you know, here at Penn State, right? But it's a challenge with the audience and the demographic in more rural areas. You know, a livelihood that is different than the desk-based livelihood of many people. Yeah, I mean, there are broadband internet initiatives, you know, in different states. I don't know the extent to which Pennsylvania, but perhaps finding a way to partner with, you know, the people rolling those out and that kind of training and so on could be a way to, you know, train more people on social media platforms that you're going to use. But it has to be a net benefit to them, or else they're not going to, you know, spend time with it. So yeah, that's a challenge, but you know, one that I think is worth pursuing.
It's also good to try to link direct outreach and social media platforms. Like, for example, let's say you hold a rally for, I don't know, stem cell research, climate change, or whatever, and then you link it to your social media account. You can get both the people that you're directly interacting with, but also the people online.
I think newspaper is still the way to go to reach an older audience.
That's
From
what
experience,
I'm trying to do.
my parents are in their 60s and they live over in New Jersey, but Penn State research frequently pops up in our papers, and that's how my mom finds out about her science information. So I don't think there is necessarily a current way to reach an older audience using social media. I think it's for a different demographic, or it would have to be someone's kids show their parents through social media.
One of the possibilities would be Facebook groups,
Yeah.
because I've worked a lot with like ASABE and all their
So
stuff.
we
with-
get more popular on Facebook and Twitter.
So that's the thing, is like John,
Different people are on Facebook and
yeah.
Twitter.
So John Deere, Case New Holland, International Harvester, they have a large group that is strictly devoted to individuals who are like very rural, so specifically like farmers and older farmers. They have these groups that are specifically like targeted toward them. So everything that they post through those groups is targeted for that audience. And they have different ones because they have all these different interns because they're big companies. They have like these media interns that their entire job is to just run these social media accounts specifically for different demographics. So they have like ones that are like Midwestern farmers above their 40s. And like, it's not like targeted, it's like not named that obviously, but like the name of the group is meant to draw in people of that demographic. And they'll do things like that, and I've seen that be really successful, especially for companies like John Deere and New Holland International Harvester. So that might be something
Check out.
to look into.
Okay.
You know, there's, I mean, I don't know if this is directly related, but maybe there's the OLLI group, which is it's through the university, it's all volunteer based. It's a way to reach, it's lifelong learning for people who are 50, 55 around here. And so that might be a way that you could reach them, is through like a short course and then teach them social media in the process. I don't know if that would help, but.
Well, I know this is a whole social media discussion, but that number up there with the 57% of people interact with more people online than in person, that terrifies me. So I'm wondering if we can find a way to make these little tidbits digestible and spreadable so that people want to talk about it. So then that way 28% of folks that can pass a basic literacy test can actually find ways to communicate it so that people can talk about it with other people, just face to face. Those people that aren't on social media, the people that aren't already in our circles that we've already convinced. So I'm wondering, how do we get this out? Because how do we use social media to make it more digestible for everybody else?
I mean, I guess I kind of feel like social media is already a step toward doing that. Because for me, my kind of process, I mean, I use Twitter, I mean, every day, and it's not always like, you know, not every tweet is a breakdown of a scientific paper or something like that. But if I publish a paper, my first step is to write a blog post about it, because I feel like I'm funded by the NSF, and so it's, you know, I feel an obligation to try and put that in lay terms and make it available to everyone. So that's kind of my first step, and then that I will obviously put on Twitter. But every step you're kind of breaking it down into kind of nugget form. So I feel like when it's on social media, it's already hopefully, well, my aim anyway is to try and make it something that somebody can go, oh, I saw this cool thing about lizards and they get stressed by ants, isn't that cool? But I also have started to really try and make it visual as well, because I think that, you know, that's kind of like breaking it right down, almost like there's
No
a
one wants to read a
hieroglyph
ton of
or lizard.
words. The image
Yeah,
helps
and I really found that was what got the most interest from people outside the scientific community, is when it's like, oh, here I am in the field with a lizard, and this is what I happen to be doing with it, but the main thing is, then I started getting people from the communities that I was working in kind of showing interest in that. And then I think that's important for a whole other range of reasons, like representing, you know, there were some stats about people can't name a living scientist. People think of scientists as white men in lab coats and kind of crazy scientists. So I try and, you know.
Well, it's probably better that they don't show what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, but maybe some like heavily curated, like the fieldwork images. People like to see
the greenhouse
young
images,
women
the beekeeping
doing
images.
research.
I love that.
Yeah.
So,
I just thought of something. I like making metaphors too. You can find ways to bridge other gaps and make the connection and that stronger. So,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
also important to watch your tone, because the way you say something can really have an effect on how people resonate with it. Like, people can feel that you're interested in it, you're passionate about it, they'll be more likely to look at your stuff, click on it, but they can also tell, like, if you don't really care about it, you're just putting it up just to get likes, they won't bother with it.
so the faculty and staff here are, you know, everyone comes with their own training in their specialized field, and, you know, very rarely are we trained to communicate well and in short blurbs. Very rarely are we trained how to take good pictures or make infographics. And so that is going to take a lot of time for everyone to learn. And I just want to know your opinion. Do you think it is the responsibility of faculty and staff to curate these social media pages, because that's going to take a lot of time to just develop these skills? Or do you think the future is more having departments within, like, universities and places of business that help, you know, the faculty and staff along with this goal?
That's a great question. And I could see it going either way. And just to let you know, personally, I feel a lot of passion for this. I'm starting a media studies graduate degree. And one of the things that I want to work on is a module mainly for grad students, especially in the STEM field. And what I'm hoping to do is to give enough information to these grad students to become better science communicators, because in my opinion, everyone's a science communicator now. So hopefully if we can elevate our game a little, and you know, the other thing I'd like to dispel is this notion that there's a lot of anti-science out there. I don't find that at all. I think people love it. And I think we've created this huge, the other thing that this social media is a huge content monster that wants to be fed. So they're out there and they want to, you know, digest this information. What we have to do, as I think, what you have to do as scientists, is start stepping back from the science and start thinking about, you know, when research papers put together, we start sort of at the top with the problem, and then we talk about the theories and all that, and then you get to the findings. But in journalism, it's flipped upside down. What they want is the findings first, and then to add credibility, how you found it. And it's all important stuff, it's just how you arrange it. So I think that eventually, my answer to that question is, I think we're all going to have to be science communicators and do a little better job. But to be honest with you, to your point, when I was doing social media for an hour in the morning, and then writing, and then interviewing, and all the other stuff that I had to do, it just wasn't enough. Because what happens is you become a really good broadcaster. So I think there's going to be a real need for specialists in that area, that their full-time job is going to be able to better disseminate this. So I think it's probably, I know I'm sounding a little hedgy, but I'm going to say it's not an either or, it's going to be a both and.
I wonder if I could just add something to that, because I don't have enough time to generate content, but I use my social media outreach as an accumulator and a filter. So I identify the key players in an area, and it's all businesses, nothing about my cat. And then I then retweet what I think is good information in the areas that I want to have influence. I actually rarely delve into my own opinion. I don't have time to write a blog, but it also accumulates all the relevant information to me. And I do a lot of personal outreach, a lot of talks. And so when I go out and talk on a controversial topic, I need to know what came out this morning, because someone in the audience is going to bring it up in the question and answer session. And if you say you haven't heard about it, then they think you're disconnected and don't know what's going on. So all the exciting stuff now, I learn on Twitter before I learn it anywhere else. I don't do Facebook because I have a problem with the way Facebook operates, so I got off Facebook a couple of years ago. But Twitter and LinkedIn, I think are effective tools. So you can influence the discussion without actually generating content. You can find the thought leaders, and then you can retweet and try to amplify the good signals and maybe help bend the story in a way that's meaningful and important to what we do.
I tend to have a lot of visual images, so very few words, just descriptive of what it is that I'm doing. I mean, it was a great way to disseminate information, but I just don't know how to target it. I think that was the biggest problem that I had, was I didn't know how to target it. Because honestly, I don't know who's interested. I think it's interesting science, but it's very, it's very, this is an observation. This is what we think it might be, and I'm putting it out there. So, it didn't always go where I wanted it to go.
Do they give you a list of who retweets your stuff?
Yeah.
Write that one down.
But then you have to go through so
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to come back to the comment you made about the 57%. Having gone through graduate training before the internet, and I'm one of those people that would fall into the demographic of your old farmers. It's not that we are communicating less, it's our reach has expanded tremendously. I still have the same wide network, but now I can reach thousands and tens of thousands of people, in my opinion, and that's scary. And so I think you have to be very careful, like the gentleman said over here, with the tone and the way you put out. I think when it comes to science communication, I think we do ourselves a disservice if we get overly political. There's a component where you can be politically active, but I try to, as I say, try to bring light to
Try
the
to keep it pretty neutral.
Yeah.
to the area, but not heat. I don't want to get it. You can get really famous by bringing a lot of heat to a subject and being rude and snarky, and you get a lot of retweets. And in the end, you feel like you're doing a great thing, but you're actually doing a disservice. So I think when it comes to the stuff that we do, the less political and more focused on what are the facts. Let people figure it out. People are smart. They'll figure it out. They'll find the people who are reasonable voices in the conversation, and then they'll follow them. And I try to be a reasonable voice in the areas that I want to influence.
I just want to tag on to that, because I think that's a critical conversation we're going to have next, because I think right now we're just trying to figure out how do we use these tools to get the information out. The next step is how can we be persuasive? And the best research in persuasion, when we talk about health communications at least, is there's a threat appeal and then there's a hope appeal. And the threat appeal actually, when you try to get someone, make someone afraid to go out and do something, like, get a cancer screening or use sunscreen, it can actually cause denialism. They can actually either become resigned to the fact that it's not going to work, or that they can actually retreat into kind of denying the science that you give them. So I think that's the next step for us, is how we're going to have to communicate a lot more carefully across the board.
Actually, I do see that a lot, especially with the bees. They're like, oh, the bees they're dying. They're all going extinct. I was like, oh, they're dying. They're not growing as quickly. So there's always ways to do it. But I mean, but then how do you sell something like as scary as that? Right. When scientists are freaking out. It's like, how about we say scientists are less calm than they were?
Yeah, well, I
Like,
think
it's sometimes it's reasonable to freak out, but how do how can you convey?
the other thing is to add pieces of self-efficacy. How can you help without, bringing, and that can change the conversations, and you can make it more holistic. That's one way that a lot of the health researchers are looking at, health communication researchers are, and I guess it would be applicable to things like climate change.
So it's like, it's scary but manageable.
But we can do something with that, give us some hope.
I think we have a great example here at Penn State with Michael Alley and Michael Mann. They've taken distinctly different approaches to talking about the topic. One is more politicized and highly partisan, and the other is not so much. And I think you got to be careful. I was raised with my grandparents, and they always say they hated the chicken little, the sky is falling. How do you move hearts and minds without being over the top? And so that's a real challenge. You want to move. I understand what Michael wants to do, get people exercised about climate change. But when you start identifying yourself as a partisan in discussion, in a scientific discussion, as a political partisan, I think all of a sudden half the people drop out because they can label you. I think the challenge is to be Teflon and not let a label stick on you. If you identify yourself in a consistent way and you can be labeled, then people can dismiss you. If they can't quite figure you out, I think they stay with you longer because they want to label you. And so I think it's a classic example if you look at Michael Alley and Michael Mann and the way they deal with the same issue.
Just to kind of expand on that a little bit, there was somebody made the point right near the beginning that they didn't want to have personal content, or it kind of stems on from the political content. I think I made a decision fairly early on because I kind of co-opted my existing social media and started using it to disseminate my own research and other research I found interesting. I kind of decided that I wasn't going to filter out the personal content because I see my science communication as not just communicating facts and research outcomes, but also I want to be visible as a female scientist. And I was aware when I was growing up that I didn't have people that I could look up to and say, oh yeah, I know that person, she's a scientist, that's a possible career outcome for me. Even as a PhD student, there were very few female role models in my field that were, and when I say that, I don't just mean prominent women, I mean women who had reasonable work-life balance. So that's something that I want to portray. So I make a point of, saying, here's some science, and I'm going for a hike today, and here's something cool that I found. So I think we're not just, as we kind of said earlier, we're not just putting out content, we kind of sometimes are the content, and I think as a young woman in science, I maybe feel that slightly differently. So I try and adapt what I'm saying, but I don't think you need to just focus on the words, but just the person that you're being, and I think it's okay to be a whole person and have flaws and opinions sometimes.
To understand the beauty of this, you can decide what to do. You talk about you can adopt different personas for each one. Twitter could be for professional, Facebook could be for personal, or a mix of both. I kind of take that approach where maybe Instagram's the only account that really shows any kind of a personal side of me, and then Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, I'm talking about mainly, highlighting workshop I'm giving or wanting to share an article that are more professional focused. So you're really in control in how you want each platform to be, how much of yourself you want to reveal. But yeah, sometimes very personality-driven content where you're out in the open and sharing your experience and talking about with a little vulnerability and talking about things that work for you, things that habits, and that people do sometimes respond to that really well. You take some chances putting yourself out there a little bit too. Criticism can come, that sort of thing. But sometimes that's what really gets people to take notice.
Speaking of putting yourself out there, as a result of the conversation today and your question about demographics, reaching different demographics, I have had an embarrassing realization that I would like to share.
So I run this annual lecture series. I've been doing it for 24, I just finished the 24th year, 6 Saturdays in a row. People at the top of their field come in, scientists, they speak. We had one from Harvard, one from MIT, one from Caltech, 3 from Penn State. Hugely popular, very engaged audience members. And what I do is I give them a learning resources handout each week, and I ask the speakers to give me their suggestions for learning resources, so that these people who come to this free mini course can not just hear the lecture, but continue to learn on their own. So it's cumulative, so by the 6th lecture, the handout is pretty thick, and it has, and every speaker sees the learning resources from the previous speakers, so they come up with new suggestions, and so it's a wealth of things they can learn. I did not think of asking them to put in any of their social media accounts. They did not think of adding any of their social media accounts. The last lecture was Saturday. I am sitting here. Next year.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, you get the big 25.
Yeah, next year. Right, next year's the big 25.
Yeah, I attended a lot of social media focused conferences, and it's becoming more and more standard in the agenda, the schedule, where you have a person's name, short bio, and a Twitter handle.
But if they had each put their own.
Yeah, you think
thing
somebody
on
would have
social
at least
media,
thought of it to want to promote it.
Not
Yeah.
just Penn State,
Yeah.
but 3 other universities.
Well, I think
And these are not old farmers. These are people of many different age groups, and they didn't think.
I think it's a mindset that you have to, I remember when I was a reporter, I was in a restaurant and the fire trucks went by, and I had only been, reporter for a couple months, and I thought, I wonder where they're going. And I thought, boy, maybe I'll read about it in the paper, and I thought, oh, it's me. So now I'm saying that it's us, that we have to start thinking about those things.
I think that's a great place to end this. Thank you all for coming out. And I think we all have a very great reminder to include social media with anything we plan. So thank you for coming out.